Hello and welcome to all participants of today's webinar. Today we are going to be talking about optimizing your processes. Once again, this is the second part of a three-part series of webinars. And today's topic will be at your own workplace or on another continent, test administration and test batteries. As you may know, if you've joined us in previous webinars, we will be doing this as two parts. In the first part, we will give you a short presentation of about 20 to 25 minutes. And in the second part, you will have the opportunity to ask your own questions, either with the question tool in the program, just typing in your questions, or if you give us a hand sign, we can unmute you and you can talk to us directly. Luckily, once again, for this presentation, I will not be talking all alone for 25 minutes, but I will be joined by my colleague, Chris. Hi, Chris.
Hello and welcome, everyone.
Who will be talking about test administration and test administration for multiple people in a little bit more detail later on in the presentation. So I would say let's jump right in. This three-part process of optimizing your processes will be split up into the test persons, or was already split up because we did that last week. The persons tab was explained in detail in that webinar, and you can already find the slides and the presentation on our YouTube page. Today, we're going to be talking about testing. And next week, on the 7th of April, we will be talking about the test results in more detail. So today we're going to look at this window a lot. We're going to be having a look at the testing tab because now we have created a new person, or we have created multiple persons in our database, and now we of course want to test them as well. So first up, you of course have to decide on a test or a test set. For tests, we have got this list of tests available, and for test sets, we have got this list available. You can check all of this out in more detail on our homepage, schufried.at. Or if you have trouble deciding on a test, it's always interesting to get as much information from the web. But if it's still troublesome, you can contact us, Test Consulting, or you can contact your customer representative, your sales representative directly to get a little bit of input about choosing the right test or test set. So if you want more information about the test you already have in your Vienna Test System, that's of course also possible. If you go to the testing tab and then look at this part of the testing tab, you can get a lot of additional information about the tests available in the Vienna Test System. So for example, if you want to find out more about the int, you click on the int and then you click on manual, and you will get the manual for the inventory of testing cognitive capabilities, which contains a lot of additional information about the test, about norm samples, about pretty much everything you want and need to know about the test. Another option is, for example, I chose the B5PS and I say I want to know more about how the norms are set up, what areas are covered in the norms. Then I can click on norms and the norm table explorer will be opened, where I can choose each and every test in the Vienna Test System or each and every available test and have a look at a detailed information about the norm samples. So now we've gathered enough information and we've chosen a test. We can start it with just a few clicks and still have a lot of options in how we want to administer the test, what parts of the test we want to administer. So first up, we go to testing, then we select the person we want to test, and then we jump right into selecting a test. In this case, I'm gonna say, okay, I want to test with the int. I'm gonna click on the int, then it shows up in the test forms. So here I can choose whichever test form I want to use. For the int at the moment, it's quite easy. There's only one test form right now. But if for other tests, that could be chosen from multiple ones. Then I can also choose the selected scales or subtests. So for the int, for example, there are 3 subtests, and in this window down here, I can choose whichever subtest I want to present. So if I don't want to present verbal ability, for example, I can click here, and then it changes to no, and then only the first 2 subtests will be presented. Then if I click this button here, I can move it over into my test sequence. And then it's just one further click on start testing. And if I have a single test station, I can jump right into the instructions and have the test person complete the test. But a lot of the time, just one test isn't enough. Let's say you're in the HR department and want to find out if a person fits to your job or to the job you're offering, and you want to know more about both cognitive abilities and personality as well. Then you will have to set up a test sequence from multiple tests, for example, the B5PS for the big 5 of personality, and the int as well for cognitive abilities. And then you will want to test a higher number of people. Then you want to save this as a test battery. You can give the test battery a name, and it will be saved for later uses or for use with direct testing, for example. So if you click OK here, then it will be saved. And then if you go to settings and test batteries, you can also have a more in-depth look about your test batteries and see which ones are available. So here you see test battery number 1, which we just created. But you can also create test batteries directly in these settings. So here you can go to settings, test batteries, and then click create. Then this window pops up. And here you can add additional information about your test battery. So the name, as we've seen before, but you can also add who was the author. So here you could put down admin, or you could put down your name. You can put down a short description, and you can also add whichever test you want to the test battery here and save it. But that's not all that can be done. The conditional test presentation also offers a lot of flexibility. So first, I'd say I'm going to call it a condition, would be the maximum test duration, which can be added here. So in this case, I added a maximum test duration of 45 minutes. But this option should really be used with caution, because it can only be used if it also suits the purpose of the testing. So for example, if you want to test someone and working under time pressure is part of the task profile, this is okay. If working under time pressure isn't really part of the task profile, then it doesn't make too much sense to limit the maximum test duration. And of course, if you use this, it has to be taken into consideration when interpreting the test results as well. Because if the norm data has been collected without maximum test duration, and you add one, of course, this can have certain influence on the test results. So use with caution. And another thing I want to add here is, if you use this option, always make sure to allow the participants to keep track of how much time has already passed. So offer a clock in the room and make clear when the time is up and how much time the participants had. Okay, so the conditions are actually go into a lot more detail and offer a lot more options as well. So if you want to present a later test in a test battery only under certain conditions, you can do this with the conditions option. So if you go here, you choose the int because it's later on in the test battery, and you go to conditions, this window will open up, and as you can see, there are no conditions pre-selected. But if you want to add one, you can click on new here. And then this window pops up. And what this does is it references a test that came earlier in the test battery and presents the second test or a later test only if certain conditions of the first test or previous test are met. So here we can choose, for example, the B5PS because this comes previously in our example. Then we choose the variable consensuousness. We choose the norm type percentile ranks. Here you can also choose certain raw scores or other normed data. You choose the according norm sample. In this case, I chose the representative norm sample. And then you have to tell the Vienna test system what the exact condition is. So in this case, I chose the comparative operator greater than or equal to. You can also choose smaller or an exact number. So only if the consensuousness percentile rank of the person is greater than or equal to the value of 25, only then the int should be presented. So this can be very valuable if you want to cut testing times short, or if you know exactly only under certain conditions it is even necessary to use a second test. So for example, if you say if someone doesn't have a percentile rank of 25 or higher, then further testing doesn't make a lot of sense for my use case, then I can just finish testing there, then this condition would be optimal for you. You can also use it in a different direction. So for example, if you use a very general intelligence test, for example, or one that doesn't differentiate very well in the higher percentile ranks, then you can say if the person scored higher than 75, then another test for a similar area should be presented as well, so you can differentiate more in this area. Okay, and then there's also the type of condition which only applies if you have more than one condition, which we're going to look at now. So if you click OK, then this pops up. So we have the first condition, only if the B5PS consensuousness, this is the C, percentile rank is greater than or equal than to 25, only then the int will be presented in our test battery. So if you want to add another condition, you can also add, for example, only if B5PS team orientation is greater than 75, then it should be presented. So here you can choose either an AND condition. So if I would choose AND here, then both consensuousness would have to be higher than 25, and also team orientation would also have to be a higher percentile rank than 75. Only then the int is presented. In this case, I chose the type of condition OR. This is the second option, which says that if either consensuousness is higher than 25 or team orientation is higher than 75, if at least one of these two conditions is met, then the int will be presented as well. So this is the conditional test presentation. It's quite detailed and quite interesting in my opinion, because it offers possibilities to further individualize your process and maybe cut sometimes a bit shorter than they would be if you always present all of the test battery. Of course, this has to be well thought out and fit your purpose, but it's an option in the very least. Okay, so from this point on, we're going to be talking a bit more about how to present tests on more than just a single test station. Of course, this option with the test batteries and the conditional test presentation is also available for direct testing, for testing with the test player, or for online testing as well. So here I'm going to hand over the slides to my colleague Chris.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julian. So after we've seen how to administer tests on single test stations, which means that the test administration software is installed on the same computer on which the actual testing is done, we will now look a bit more into how to administer group testings The procedure is quite the same for online testings, but please note that today we will mostly talk about group testings. If you want to have more information on online testing, I recommend you to visit our dedicated or a specifically dedicated webinar to online testing or online testing, which is already on our website. So in group testing sessions, we usually have on one side the admin client or the admin computer on which the administration software, namely the Vienna Test System, as we've seen it before, is installed. Additionally, we have multiple test stations. Let's say, for example, 3 test stations in the same room or on another continent. Depends on if you do a local testing or an online testing, but let's say it's in the same room today. And on these test stations, there is the so-called test player installed, on which the participant can register him or herself and start the testing and do the actual testing. To do so, the participant enters the personal ID in the registration screen. There's a quite handy feature in the Vienna Test System which helps you to print out a sheet for every participant on which name, date of birth, and ID number is given, and you can just hand out these sheets to the participants, and they can take place on or can take seat on whichever test station they want, enter their personal ID, then they have to do a quick identity check where they have to confirm that they are really the person displayed, and if they click yes, the actual testing starts. So after we've seen what the participant has to do on a test station, let's have a look at what the test administrator has to do in the administration software to enable the participant to start the testing. To do so, you have to first select the participant, then click on Edit, and then go to the details of the personal data and assign a test battery for direct testing. At this point, it gets quite clear why it's important to know what a test battery is, how to create them, and how to alter them later, because you have to assign them here. Of course, you can also assign a single test, but you also have to save the single test first into a test battery and then assign it with this field of text here. You can, of course, assign this test battery when creating the person in a person's database, but if you forget it, you can also do it later and use the edit button. Then after the testing, you can see all results in the admin client. Of course, the results are not available or displayed on the test player. So on a single or on the test stations, participants have no opportunity to see their own results or results of other participants, which is quite important for data privacy, of course. Then the registration screen can also be individualized. To do so, we go to Settings, Direct Texting, and then Registration. And here we see that we have different options. First of all, we have the identification of the respondent. As you've seen before, or as you have just seen, the default here is the entry of the personal ID, but you can, of course, use other identification processes such as entering the name and sex, or name, date of birth and sex, or additionally the educational level. There are quite similar options for the identity check. You can either use the default, which is confirmation of name and date of birth, or require the participant to enter the date of birth, which is quite handy to prevent participants just clicking continue, 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 and do not really reading what is on the screen. Or there's an even simpler option, the confirmation of the name. Furthermore, you can select multiple languages for the test player or for the registration screen. As you can see here, I've selected German, English, and French. And before the participant actually gets to the screen where he or she is asked to fill in the personal ID, he or she can select the language preferred. It is important to note here that this language selection will only affect the actual registration process, not the test session or the tests themselves. Then we have further options. We're still in settings, direct testing, and then options. And here you can find a quite cool feature it is possible to upload your own company's logo to the Vienna Test System. And what this will do is it will display the logo prior to every test session. So before the registration screen is shown, your company's logo will be displayed, which will give you more opportunities for individualization. Furthermore, we have the option to allow repetition of tests or of test batteries. Here you have two options. First of all, imagine participant leaving the test station and then coming back after a while and re-registering to the test session. And the first option is that the test station or the test player will repeat all tests of the battery again. So the second option here is, which is quite useful for, let's say, assessment centers where you also do other exercises like role plays, that only those tests of the test battery are repeated which are not yet completed. So that means imagine the person doing a test battery with 4 tests, and after 2 tests it's time for the role play, and the person leaves the test station, goes to the role play. During this time, another test person is tested on the same test station with an own ID, and then after a while, test person 1 comes back to the test station, re-registers, and can continue at test 3 and is not required to do all the tests again. Then the next setting is found in Settings, Direct Testing, and Test Presentation. Here you can assign a default test battery. As you can see here, I've assigned a test battery with Cogbut, our test set for cognitive functions here. And what this will do is it will allow you to skip the step where you have to assign a test battery to every test person in the Persons tab. This is quite useful if you are only using the same test battery and are and you don't want to switch between test batteries because it will obviously reduce the effort. Then we have the option to adjust what happens if the test person is doing too much errors during the practice phase of the test phase, which is called error response here. The default is that the test administrator decides what should happen. So this means that if I do the practice items or if I fail the practice items too often, there pops up a screen, and the screen says, okay, please notify the test administration. The test administrator then has the chance to explain verbally to the test person what is required, or ask why it was difficult for the test person, maybe the wrong language, or maybe the wrong language was displayed, or the test person has difficulties with this language. Then another option is the automatic restart. This will restart the whole instruction and practice phase. And then the last option is the automatic repetition. This will only restart the practice phase or respectively the item in which the test participant had problems. And last but not least, you can also adjust the duration of the test completion message. It is shown in seconds here. So 60 seconds is the time for which the screen, thanks for your participation, is displayed after the testing. This can be made longer. For example, if you want to have more time to pick up the participant from his place and then place another participant there. And of course, not only settings within the Vienna test systems are important for the testing, but also further factors. And the golden rule here is that transparency increases acceptance. That's why we recommend that already when inviting the participants, you should give a short explanation of the aims of the testing. Furthermore, you should try to create optimal conditions, for example, allowing a comfortable sitting position, appropriate lighting, or and very important, an environment free of disturbances. And immediately before the testing, we recommend to repeat the objectives of the testing again, also explain the contents and duration of the testing. Very important, explain how data will be handled, because we are obviously working with very sensitive personal data here. And last but not least, inform the participant that all necessary instructions are given on the screen, that these should be read carefully, and participants should work independently. This will allow you to save a lot of effort, because participants will most of the time, I'm talking from experience here, ask for further information when they're not reading the instructions carefully.
Thank you very much, Chris, for this insight. I can only stress this from my point of view as well. Really explaining and informing all participants prior to the testing helps to get a smooth testing going and to avoid too many questions during the test phase. So these are very good tips from my point of view. Now, the only thing that's missing is the result, actually. So we are finished for today's webinar. This is a short teaser for the test results tab. We will be talking about in the webinar on the 7th of April. And I hope you will be joining us again. For now, I want to thank you for your participation.